Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Scott Shimp with Data Society, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Vijay Yadav, Director of Data Science, Advanced Analytics, and AI/ML at Merck. Vijay, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. Glad to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Excellent. To get started, tell us more about your role and your team. What kinds of impacts do you seek to drive for the organization? And how do you think about your stakeholders internally and externally, regulators, medical providers, and patients?
Sure. So thank you once again. My name is Vijay Yadav, and I'm heading an advanced analytics team here at the digital transformation function within Merck. Merck is one of the top pharmaceutical company in the world, and the remit of my team is really to apply the advanced technologies such as AI and GenAI to produce safe and quality products, which is medicines to the patients across the globe. Our challenge even becomes more important applying AI and GenAI because we impact people's life, their health. And one of the areas that I think we have been kind of looking into is that Merck has not been able to produce enough products that are basically saving the life, right? So now every dose that we produce extra, a safe product, it is basically saving people's lives. So the impact of my work and my team's work and the company work is really directly impacting the people. In terms of how we apply internally within the company, GenAI and AI, but also how we meet our regulatory compliance element when we go out and report the data and reporting to the outside agencies such as FDA or other agencies in Europe and Asia and other places, right? So there's a different spectrum in terms of the compliance. And on top of that, the compliance in terms of ethics, how do we make an ethical use of AI/ML? It becomes critically important for us to do that. So happy to be here. We are making a good headway in that direction, and happy to share some of more details on some of the work that we're progressing.
Thank you so much. So when it comes to data science and advanced analytics these days, of course, the topic on everybody's mind is generative AI. Comes as no surprise. So to what extent has the emergence of this technology, these new capabilities and tools changed what you're focusing on?
So that's a great question, Scott. And I would say, the emergence of GenAI, I would put them in two buckets actually, and that's the way I see it. And even the company Merck is looking into that. One is we look at this as a strategic challenge. And I'm using the word strategic, meaning we all know the data is an asset, right? It's a strategic asset that we have. Now, so far, traditionally, we have been applying analytics on top of the data that is sitting in databases, the data marts, data warehouses, which is structured in nature. But now, with the emergence of GenAI, now we got to look into the data that is sitting. We have not been able to use it, which is unstructured data that sits into PDF file, Word documents, other SharePoint, Excel sheet, all those knowledge. And we all know based on the benchmark, 75% of the data sits in those unstructured format. So what that tells us is that so far, whatever we have been driving, analytics, it's only 25% of the data that is structured. Now, if we can bring that together, right? Now we're talking about the real good decision-making data that is based on the full information available to us. But the challenge there is that how do we connect the two? The structured data, unstructured data, right? So this is how I see as a strategic, challenge. Also, I see is that how do we scale it up? Right? So once we talk about the solution, and there's so many use cases in GenAI space, should be developing a solution for every use case, or think in a way that we can apply that is scalable enterprise grade solution. So how do we do that, right? So these are the challenges. But think about if we are able to overcome these two challenges, we are coming to a whole new level of insights that we have not been able to do before, right? Anytime we have a insights which is based on just the structured data, then we have to take the requirements of every employee. Now, it is not possible to take every employee that develop, individual analytics for all of them, right? So that's why the predetermined requirements based analytics is it meets the need, but it doesn't meet the whole need. We want to be a situation, a true north, where I can develop a solution which is basically have the whole knowledge base together, and it can meet almost any question, any analytics you want for that specific domain. I want to hand over to the user, right? So it's about democratizing the analytics is much more easier now. I would say not easier, it's very much possible. To do that was not possible before, right? So I do see as a strategic challenge, but also opportunities, a quite amount of opportunity, and happy to share some of the work that we have been basically doing.
So, given all of those challenges and opportunities, what is your approach to data skill development within your team, the technical folks, as well as data literacy across all the range of different roles and stakeholders across the company? And how will you ensure that your team and all those stakeholders are up to speed on generative AI as it continues to evolve? Is this a question of incremental change to those roles and those skills, or does it really require completely new thinking?
Yeah, no, again, that's a really important question, and I would say that it is a journey. We, at least in our side, we can't claim that we are there yet to really to have a true north where we have gone and almost make people literate about the Gen AI. But I think we have taken a very structured approach about how we go in a very organic way, and I'll talk about some of those details. So, if I look at the audience of any corporation, Merck is no exception, I can put them into three buckets. One, people who are technical in nature, meaning the people who are data savvy, data scientists, data engineers, architects, things of that nature, right? Who have a background in data. Other extreme side on the spectrum is the people who are the business users, who necessarily don't have that kind of background in AI and Gen AI space. And then you can bring somewhere in the middle, the people are more like a data savvy, things of that nature. Now, if you look at the three audience together, you have to apply a very different techniques, how we want to create awareness, what Gen AI can do for them, right? So if I take the very right-hand side, which is business users, right? It is a journey. What we have been able to do is that we have been able to create awareness about the Gen AI and discovery of the use cases in a very organic way, almost literally start from the awareness. And as part of the same discussion in the journey of the spectrum, how do we discover that what is possible, basically, to apply Gen AI to do that so that people can have a context? Everybody knows what the chat GPT is, Gen AI is, all the users, everybody is excited. But how does it apply to their individual situations? I think this is where our role as a data analytics team is as part of the education and training is that. So, as part of that structure, when we go and meet the stakeholders, when we started our journey almost a year ago, we went with awareness session, a training session, a very high level, and bring them engaged into that discussion. Actually, it's what Gen AI is, what are some of the risks out there, because that's another other journey part of that. It's not about applying Gen AI, especially for pharmaceutical. We want to make sure that the people are aware of the risk and ethics involved into that right from the beginning, right? So when they're thinking about the situations, they are looking into, okay, where can I basically apply, right? So you start from there, and then after that initial session is normally 2 hours, we give them enough thought to think, okay, where does it apply to them? So we give them 2 to 3 weeks to really think it over. And then we come back and start have the discovery session. Let's talk about your use case based on what we talked about that and go through that piece and then pick up 1 or 2 or 3 use cases really and show them the power. And that's how kind of engagement that happens in that level. I can tell you that we have been very successful. We got so many use cases coming from the business that we don't have people to solve it. It is that amount of list that we have. And I'm happy to share some of the work in that space. The other side of the spectrum, where we have a data scientist, right, as part of the team, they have the background. I think if you look at the AI background, they have foundational experience already. So there's an incremental change for those people, right? How do we put them into that mode where applying the Gen AI? So, our philosophy has been on the job training. So the fact that these people have background, foundational experience, let's bring some experienced people who have done the Gen AI, bring some people who don't have Gen AI experience, but they are data scientists, they have a technical background, put them as part of the project and let them go through the journey of one or two projects. And then basically after two projects, I think they're ready to go that aspect. So it's more like hands-on working experience for those. So that's working really, really well. We can tell you that our entire almost 80 to 90% people are now on Gen AI trained as part of my team to do that. And anything in between, that's about continuous workshop, training programs, boot camps, things of that nature. That's a continuous journey that we've been able to do it.
It's great to hear. So you bring technical expertise as well as a business perspective to your role. And given all of that, and given how you are engaging with all these different stakeholders, bringing together these cross-functional teams, what framework are you using to evaluate which projects are going to be most promising? How are you thinking about all that, the wide scope of things that generative AI can help us do? How do you evaluate what has the greatest potential?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so if I start with is the first one comes to the business alignment, right? So whatever the problem we have been thinking to solve it, we got to make sure that there's a business outcome that's aligned with if we can do, frankly speaking, in strategic objective where the company is heading and some of the work that we have been able to do it. So we got to think from the lens of whatever the problem we are looking at, the projects we're looking, how well it is aligned with the business. If it is not aligned, it might be good for the education training, but then we're wasting our time not to deliver the outcome that we're basically looking for, right? The second priority, so it's not only the idea and then you go start working. There's a lot more component that you have to consider before you say, this is what I'm going to pick up. So the second element is the availability of quality data. So we might have some fancy, great idea to solve, right? But if you don't have a quality data to do that, then probably that problem is not worth basically, taking it. Now imagine if these two things are there, that we're fully aligned with the business, we have a data, now comes the technical feasibility. Do we have the power? Do we have the technology? Do we have the resource to develop the solution? So the whole technical feasibility and resource availability is the piece. So if you want to, for example, the fine tuning, right? Fine tuning is a task that you need a lot of resource and money and budget to get the infrastructure in place. We need the people who are trained to fine tune the model, things of that nature, right? So that's another element of that. The next element I would consider is the risk profile. So yes, we can solve the problem. And if you're making a decision whereby we are impacting the people's health, making the safety of the products, the quality of the products, you better be 100% accurate, right? So even that sounds that all those three elements are ready, but if the risk that we're trying to consider, if it's too risky, then you don't want to basically do that. So the same thing apply for the ethical use cases as well to do that. So I think if we can look into those four elements, and if all of them are we have considered, and if they meet the need that we have considered everything, that's the one we want to go after, right? Now, in terms of the scoping, as we are starting the journey, we don't have to do the big bang projects. I think we want to take all those four elements, but narrow down the focus of the problem that we're trying to solve, right? In a way that we can meet, certain scope, a certain timeline, let people see the value, and basically go from there. So it's based on multi-factor availability, right? So we have some projects that we're looking down the line 3 to 5 years. Some projects we want to deliver in 3 months, some we have in a year. So again, I think there's a lot more capability, foundational capability we're building for the future, but also we are looking into how quickly we can solve low-hanging fruits that we can drive the value from.
Sounds like you have a very structured, deliberate, thoughtful approach here. So, given all of that, really excited to hear more about a particular example that you can share where you're working on generative AI. And what are some of the key challenges that you see in implementing this project? What are the opportunities? How are you trying to address those challenges and highlight those opportunities for all your stakeholders?
Sure. So before I get to the actual use case, if I think it through, if I can categorize the different capability that we're pulling together for GenAI use cases, one is the search. Can we apply search capability to get the insight much faster than used to be a manual process? So one category of solution is searching capability. And we have branded within my team, we'll call intelligent search. And the intelligent search is that it has a certain framework that if you're looking some information which is buried into, you know, 5,000, 6,000 PDF files, you don't know which document it is about that one. Can you give me a very generic solution to go and search your knowledge, whatever it could be? This is not based on one type of question that I'm looking for. Literally, it's open-ended. It gives you the capability to search that, right? So intelligent search, and we can talk more, little bit more technical side of it. So that's one capability. The second capability is Q&A, right? If I ask the question, same way that we apply ChatGPT or any other solutions, and as a user, I am open to ask any question I want within given a certain domain, not the entire universe of the company question and answer, but question and answer in a certain domain or subdomain. So that's a Q&A. It's more like a chat bot type of, AI assistant type of scenarios. So third category is generating the content. So let's say, we have a standard operating procedure, millions of them, and I want to create a new draft, another SOP based on certain criteria I provide that, hey, generate the content for me in SOP, at least is ready to basically do that. Or I can generate other content based on some criteria I give it to you, and you go behind the scene, find out what knowledge you want to pull it from that. I can define in the background and give me this content. So these are three different categories of the GenAI project that we have looked into that. And I'm happy to talk, some of the use cases that we have done. But let me stop there. Hopefully that basically makes sense.
Absolutely. So, within the context of that project, but also more broadly, as you talked about, you mentioned the ethical and regulatory potential features of some of these tools. So, how do you think about data governance in particular with respect to generative AI and these use cases that you're working on? How does that approach to data governance intersect and influence how you're approaching all these projects, who you're interacting with, and how those projects unfold?
Yeah, data governance is really, really important piece. I mean, I would say that the data governance is even more important today than it was before, right? So we have what we call AI ethics and compliance committee, and I'm one of the members for that, right? So what we have basically done as part of that piece is that all GenAI projects are basically filtered through a central team, which is basically kind of triaging and understanding where the request is coming from. So that team, so it's not like you go and somebody can just go and develop the GenAI solution and basically start doing it. There's a whole team that is basically evaluating. And as you know that in order to develop the GenAI, you need a keys. Now, your keys are not going to get granted just like that. There's evaluation that basically takes place that we can give you the keys to develop GenAI only we understand what you're going to use for. Have you considered all the ethical use, any type of bias, risk associated with that? All those elements are basically part of that team. So it's a very thoughtful way. So there's a whole control mechanism in terms of the how we apply the GenAI. The other element I would say is that sometimes the data may not be available, right? So if we are creating a synthetic data, so there's a whole consideration of is that how ethical it is, what kind of risk that basically it can bring into play, right? Do that. So those are some of the elements of that in terms of data governance and even the GenAI use cases for us to consider. But the other thing that I would say is the metrics. How do we measure? How do we benchmark that the solution that we are developing? How do we know it's even working? Whether it's a hallucination and things of that nature, right? So that's another element that is always considered as part of the governance. That what is the benchmark, and there's a whole enterprise-wide some of the benchmark that we kind of have developed our own benchmarks within the company basically do that. So that also has to be looked into that, right? When we go and roll out the models, it has to meet the benchmark needs to go and apply that. So those are some of the elements that I would say the part of the governance element.
Very interesting. So I guess moving now to the technical side, you see so many companies out there coming out with new tools all the time. As I said, it's rapidly evolving, and you have the big tech companies, the ones everyone's familiar with, as well as a large number of startups, all coming out with new models, new tools, new applications. There are also lots of open source models out there developed by different types of organizations. So, given that landscape, how do you think about all those options as you're considering the technical approach to your generative AI projects?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And as you can say, we earlier I mentioned about the fine tuning, right? So the fine tuning is something that we have to use the open source model. For example, in certain situations we are experimenting. We have not done yet. We are looking into Llama, for example, even the Microsoft, some of the open source technology that basically offering, right? So it's a mix of something, OpenAI plus Llama, Gemini to do that. And there's a whole team that is working to evaluate which model even as a company level, which one is we're thinking, experimenting that we should basically go. So there's some already filtered kind of models open source that has been vetted by our enterprise city organization that we look into that, and then we start using into that piece. So I would say it's a mix of open source. Again, we are in journey. I won't call it that we're at the level where we are kind of fine tuning and developing all the models ground up. I think it's a journey. So still it is phases of the research, but I would say it's a mix of the open source plus our own models that we are using OpenAI. For example, Microsoft OpenAI, also AWS platform to do that. So some AWS, Microsoft, and then open source, and kind of bringing together what basically makes sense.
Thank you for that. Let's try to put this moment in perspective here. So, of course, this is not the first time that there have been new technologies coming out and everyone's talking about it and how it's going to change how we do everything and all of that. So, thinking about innovation and generative AI here, from what you've seen from a couple decades of experience in life sciences, how does this moment compare to previous moments where we've seen new technologies and all of that conversation is happening about how it's going to change things, especially around data-driven approaches, analytics, data science? How does this strike you, this particular moment with generative AI?
I mean, we are at the totally different new age. And if I take the pharmaceutical life science industry, if we look at the value chain, we discover the drugs, we do R&D, research and development, then you basically transfer technology and you scale it up to the manufacturing. Then you got a supply chain. And then how do we go back to the patients? How do we understand the market? What patients need? What are some of the disease, right? So literally, if you look at all these value chain, right from the drug discovery till we get to the patients and understanding the patients, what patients are basically saying, we are at a totally different age. Drug discovery. Let's just start from there. Huge use cases. One of the company that is leading is that they are using all the failed clinical trials to develop the new molecules and new ideas. It is phenomenal. That was not even possible. When the companies have the failed clinical trials, They may not use the data ever in their lifetime, but there are companies, startups who are really saying that give us the failed clinical trials. We are going to dig into that. And we're going to come back and give you advice what a different pathway and new medicine that is basically possible. If you failed it, what are some of the regions, not only at the high level, but also at the very technical level, right? Looking at the images, looking at other records, patients' data that was used, what were the side effects that were found, what were some of the regions, and coming with the new drugs to do that. That is phenomenal. Even the drug discovery, when you're looking for the molecules, the whole genomics space is basically flooding with the GenAI use cases to do that. Once we do that, then we come back to research and development, right? So if we want to, develop a new drug applying this, now we have insights and ideas that we can combine the structured, unstructured data to really even do the research and development and clinical trials space as that. A clinical trial is a big element of that, right? So, when we come to the, let's say, phase 3, clinical trial takes a lot of time. It takes years and years of data. Now we are able to apply GenAI. At least we are making headway to reduce the, clinical trials period by applying the data that was not been possible, right? Can we understand the implication of medicines without giving a dose to the patients? Is there any way, for example, real world evidence? So real world evidence is a great example whereby you are learning the effect of medication based on what the prior real world evidence about the patient of certain demographics, certain age, certain conditions that they might have. You can really insights based on that whether your drugs is going to be effective or not, just based on those pieces rather than you start trying on people, right, to do that. So that's another area that basically doing that. Then whole manufacturing space, the digital transformation, we could not think doing applying AI and Gen AI in the manufacturing of the medicines and some of the use cases. For example, one of my team has been working in what we call investigation workbench. And this particular use case, which is Gen AI based, which has included the intelligent search, which includes the Q&A and creating the content. And the idea behind is that if we are during the manufacturing production process, if you have a lot of issues, let's say last 10 years, being a pharma industry, we have to document every problem that has happened. We document what did we do, how did we solve it. Everything is stored in the PDF format to do that. What we have come with the solution is that let's gather the knowledge in all these PDF documents over 10 years, literally, and come with a solution that if a new problem happens, we can go to this system and say, if this problem is happening, I'm sensing this. Tell me if this happened anywhere in the company in the last 10 years. How did we solve it? What product was that? Who were the people engaged on that? Right? What is the root cause analysis? Is it happened the first time? It has happened multiple times. That is on the fingertips. That is not possible before. So imagine we can cut down the time from days to minutes, actually, to find out the root cause of a problem and solve it. So we can now get back to the production line and produce more medicines and get to the more, access to the drug product, the medicines, right? That was not possible before the Gen AI. Just one example. So I would say even the operation side of manufacturing is big time. Move on to the supply chain, big time supply chain. And we all know that there's a whole risk, happening within supply chain. Can we predict what is happening in the supply chain? Apply that Gen AI and make sure that we are addressing any risk. We can take an action proactively. Then after that, it gets to the patients, understanding the patient's data, understanding what patients are saying, even with the social media to different channels, understanding so we can use that information to improve the product for the next phase of the product, or maybe come up with the new ideas for the next drug happening to do that. So if you look at that, all literally Gen AI is impacting the entire value chain of life sciences industry.
It's exciting stuff. Well, thank you, Vijay Yadav, for joining me today. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for more interviews.
Thank you, Scott.